Hey guys, Marsingin here, bringing up Dragon Ball Z Dokkan battle video, and so today we are going to do my top 10 list for EZA TUR'S on global. We are going to include Super EZA's in the list as well. I did talk about this a bit yesterday after having gotten to use STR Broly a little bit. I had mentioned in the recent few days that I was going to get around to doing an EZA TUR tier list because it had been a while since I've done one on the channel. And then of course when Broly got his EZA, I thought it was probably worth, or his Super EZA I should say, probably worth putting it off by a day just to give him a bit of testing and then see where we would put him on the list and bring it out now. So I should say, as I always do at the beginning of these tier list videos, if you're someone who checks out these videos regularly, you know exactly what we're going to go through in this bit here. But obviously I make my tier lists entirely based on my own experience in the game with using the units, which is why I only ever do lists for units that are on global only. So obviously characters like STR Dokkan Fest Fidel, who doesn't have an EZA on global yet, will not be included in the list. I'm assuming from what I hear, from how people talk about her, she probably would be in the top 10, but she's not on global. I haven't gotten a chance to use her, so I only do tier lists for characters on global. And again, it's based on my own experience, so you might have a different experience with some units, especially if parts of their kit are revolving around RNG. I might have had repeated bad experiences with a unit, whether it's dodging or additionaling and all that kind of stuff, and you may have had good experience with those characters. And then, of course, our thoughts on them may vary overall. But at the end of the day, everybody has different opinions. Do let me know what your personal top 10 list is down below in the comments. And, of course, if you disagree with any of the placements, do let me know. In a civilized fashion, I'm more than happy to respond to people in the comments and discuss. As I said in the previous tier list, I think units that are right next to each other on the list, whether it's above or below, you could probably make arguments for switching them anyway, and I probably wouldn't have too much of an argument against it, especially when it comes to EZA's. A lot of these units are good because they're good on their specific team builds. And some are better on their preferred teams than others. Some don't have as many preferred teams, and that will affect the ranking potentially as well. Like, it's one of those things, if a unit would be the best EZA in the game but you can only use them on one team, versus like the character that would be number 2 but you can use them on like 20 teams, like, should that unit really be number 1? Like, everyone kind of has their own different ways to evaluate the unit. So if you do disagree with any of my placements, like I say, do let me know down below in the comment section, but at least give me some something to work with, right? Let me know why you disagree, what you think should be different, and yeah, I'll be more than happy to discuss all of that stuff down below. So we are going to jump in straight away with the number 10 pick, which is the Tech Super Saiyan 3 Gotenks Super EZA. This guy, I think his Super EZA is good, but he's a unit that, unlike some of the other Super EZA characters, I find myself on like a lot of the teams that he's on, just not really running him as like a top choice. Like, if we think about the AGL Angel Super Saiyan 3 Goku, like Majin Buu Saga team, he's not a unit that I like immediately put on as like a top pick for that team. He definitely is good on that team, don't get me wrong, but yeah, he's a character who I think since we got his Super EZA, since I did the initial bunch of like showcases and testing and stuff like that, I haven't really used him a crazy amount. Obviously he kind of relies on dodge when it comes to being able to take big damage, unless you are getting that 11 key super consistently, which of course then gives him the 50% damage reduction. But it's kind of always been the problem with this guy, where some of the teams that you might want to run him on and some of the link partners that he can have, you can end up in a situation where you get too much key, and then you can't actually get a 12 key 11 key super with him, right? You have to get the 12 key, which still does give him the extra dodge chance, but then he's not hitting as hard. Like, he's certainly a very good unit. I should stress as well, like, any units on this list, obviously not suggesting any of these units are bad. I mean, they're in the top 10 after all. But yeah, this guy, I just don't find myself using him as much as I do with some of the other units on the list on a lot of the teams that they could go on. But obviously do let me know what you think. Especially with this next guy, we have at number 9 the physical Goku Black with his Super EZA. I feel like this guy was underrated. Like, for the Super Bosses team, when he got his EZA, he was really, really good. And with all the content that we have coming out against like Goku family enemies and stuff, it's very easy to get his passive, get his orb changing, which can be really useful for a lot of the teams that he's on. My only real issue with him, which we found when playing through a lot of the like anniversary content for global, is that even with a lot of orbs, he is a character that is reliant on orbs, right? You need to build up a lot of orbs with him for his nuking style passive. He is then, of course, like after supering, he's got very, very good defense. Although, unfortunately, it is just raw defense, right? He can build up to a pretty high amount of defense depending on how many orbs you get. But my biggest issue with him was doing the more difficult content, especially from the anniversary, and having him get killed by super attacks, which... I mean, with the support he provides to the team, the orb changing, like everything else he's doing, I've said many times in the past, like I'm not somebody who, I don't think a unit has to do absolutely everything, right? Like this guy's providing a lot of support to the team. He's got the links, he's got the orb changing, he does decent damage, he tanks normals. So then the fact that he doesn't tank supers very well, like I'm not going to turn around and then say he's a bad unit, because that's not his role on the team, right? He isn't a tank. But he was definitely hurt by the fact that we went through a certain amount of time in the meta where like a lot of the toughest endgame bosses were STR. But I do feel like this guy is really good. And for me personally, because when it comes to putting the super EZA characters on this list, I already think it's kind of hard mixing them with the normal EZA characters, because super EZAs kind of are their own thing, and we would expect them, since they're basically getting an EZA again, we would obviously expect some of them to be better than current EZAs that are in the game that are only got their first EZA, right? But when it comes to putting the super EZA characters on the list, I had to think about, in my own mind, like I had my own idea for like who was be in order of the best super EZAs, and for me, I liked Goku Black more than Gotenks, so it doesn't make sense for me to put him below him when we get to the full like top 10 EZA TURs. But let me know what you guys think. Do you think Tech Gotenks is better than Physical Goku Black? Like I say, if you wanted to switch these two, since they're literally at 9 and 10, I probably wouldn't have that much of an argument about it, but do let me know what you guys think. So then at number 8, we have Int LR Broly. Now this one I think will be an interesting placement. I don't know whether anyone will think that even number 8 is too high. I don't know. I don't know if there'll be many people that think that a number 8 is too low. I guess maybe there'll be people that think even if 8 sounds about right, they would have Gotenks or Goku Black higher. I'm not sure. But obviously, again, let me know your guys' thoughts down below. But essentially, when it comes to this guy, I do think he is underrated. He is definitely very much hurt now by the fact that we just got the STR Broly Super EZA, who is way, way better than this guy. Spoiler alert for, you know, a later on portion of this video, right? But the STR Broly Super EZA kind of takes this guy's place. And when you have the Int LR Legendary Super Saiyan Broly running around as well, it means that Broly team is then looking at having multiple characters that have the name Legendary Super Saiyan Broly, and there's only room for so many of them on the team, right? But I do think this guy is still good and a bit underrated, because we get a lot of content now with these end game events for like the Blue Zone for worldwide, the one from the anniversary, where we're fighting Goku family enemies, or I should say Pure Saiyan, Hybrid Saiyan, or movie heroes, and then obviously one where the name includes Goku. So there are a lot of events where we are able to get this guy's passive active, and he can build up defense relatively quickly. If you're fighting that right kind of enemy for him, he has very, very good damage reduction. So it's the kind of thing that when comparing him to some of the people that I put lower on the list, it's like if this guy against the right enemy, like in the right scenario, he's definitely going to be better defensively after getting some supers off than units like the Gotenks or the Goku Black. But obviously if you're then in an event where you're not fighting a Pure Saiyan, Hybrid Saiyan, or movie hero, and especially whose name includes Goku, then in that situation you obviously then could argue that Gotenks or Goku Black would potentially be better than him. So it is kind of a situational thing, but you know, I do like to think about, if we're talking about these units at their best, like how good are they? Are they, you know, worthy of being in a certain position on the list? And I do think that this guy has enough events that are relevant in the meta, the way he gets his full passive active, that we shouldn't be acting like, you know, he's never getting it active and therefore he sucks. He makes a unit that can be pretty good as just a floater on that team. The active skill turn, he can do some really nice damage. So I think he's good. I don't think he's great by any means, but I think he's a very good unit. I think he's underrated. But yeah, he comes in at number 8. So then at number 7, we have the Tech Exchange Boo. Now, Tech Exchange Boo, this is one of the units that I was kind of alluding to earlier when I said about, you know, a character could be really, really good, but only really be on one team. And then for me, I feel like that kind of puts them a little bit lower on the list. And that is kind of the case with this guy a little bit, I think. Because like the Boo team is really, really good, the Int Boo team. And when I build that team with the Int Fat Boo leader, like I will basically always put this guy on that team. But the problem then is, like, where else would I or do I ever use him? And the answer is really nowhere. Like, there are no other teams. Like, I know he can be run on other teams, right? Because of the leader skill, like a lot of the categories he's on a lot of categories. You can fit him onto a lot of other teams, but he's got those very Boo specific links. So you kind of always want to be running him with another Boo. He of course needs another Martian Power ally attacking in the same turn in order to get his damage reduction. Having the no Martian Power enemies thing is basically free, right? There's only literally the red zone from Golden Week where that would be an issue. But this guy is very, very good. Like the Tech Boo that he is on turn 1 is nothing super impressive. Then he transformed into Evil Boo on the next turn and he is pretty good. And then of course it's when you get to turn 7 he becomes Super Boo. I think if you could become Super Boo a lot quicker, I would probably have him higher on the list, because Super Boo is very, very good and very powerful. But I think as he stands now, this is a decent place for him when I consider him versus some of the other characters around him, right? Because the character that we're going to have above him at number 6 is essentially his counterpart that released at the same time, the Int Gotenks. And the units are very similar, right? They transform on the next turn into a second form, then they transform a few turns later into their more powerful like final form. But I do think that Gotenks is better overall, largely just because of the amount of teams that he's on in comparison to the Exchange Boo, right? Like this guy can be run on so many different teams, things like Hybrid Saiyans, Boo Saga, Super Saiyan 3, which I guess isn't really much of a team at the moment, but Power Beyond Super Saiyan, and of course Super Saiyans. Like he's just on so many of these big teams and he's really, really good. I've had runs, like he does kind of rely on dodge, especially when it comes to if he was to have to take a big attack like a super. But I have found this guy to be very, very good. Like I've had runs where he will just dodge everything. Not that that's the reason why I'd put him this high, because of course that is pure RNG, and we can always have runs with these RNG related characters that go badly. But he can do multiple supers, he's raising his defense with each super, he links really well with the rest of the team, and then of course like you can throw him on a team almost as a floater because he doesn't require any specific allies or anything. And then once you actually get to the point of transforming him into Super Saiyan 3 Gotenks, on that turn he is really, really powerful, drops some big numbers, still has that dodge, and is just a very powerful unit overall. So this guy's still very good. I still end up using him on a few different builds, whether it's the Boo Saga team or Super Saiyans, depending on who else you're bringing. He can still be a very, very good addition to the team. So then above him, that was number, what? So we're at 7, 10, 9, 8, 7, 6. Now he's 6. So number 5. At number 5, we have STR Kefla. Now, these were kind of heavily debated when they came out, because they came out relatively similar times, I guess, where they are very similar. Like Kefla came out and was really, really good. Gotenks' EZA got announced and is obviously very similar. Like they kind of rely on dodge when it comes to being able to survive the more powerful attacks. Now, obviously, early on, Kefla is more restricted because her dodge chance, you do need to pick up a certain number of orbs. Now, it is only 3. And then she gets an additional super if you get 6. The reason why I think I like her more than Gotenks, and why I use her on teams more often than I would put Gotenks if it was that final slot for a 6th character, is just the absolute insane amount of damage that she does. That shouldn't be a surprise to anyone, based on like the previous tier list I did for the LRs, based on how I talk about like how much fun I have with the Broly team. You know, STR LR Cooler was my favorite unit in the game when he came out for the 2022 Worldwide Celebration. Like, I'm a big fan of big damage units and teams that do crazy damage. So Kefla is really, really cool and really fun for these events where especially you get a little bit longer to actually get her set up and get her going. And then she's putting out like crazy high numbers without really requiring too much effort. You obviously want to get those additionals in there as much as possible to get as many stacks as you can, but she is certainly a very, very good unit who still even now works really well on some of these teams. Now, her biggest downfall is, just like the Gotenks and some of these other dodge-based units, is she does need to dodge these big attacks in order to survive, right? If she gets tagged by a super, by any of these tough end game, like final stage bosses, she is potentially just going to get straight up one shot. I mean, I say potentially, she almost certainly will, right? But the amount of damage that she brings to the team is definitely very, very good. And of course, we've had a lot of these newer events, whether they are from the worldwide and you're fighting against Broly, or from some of these Blue Zone stages where you're fighting Goku or Vegeta or both together. We actually have some more events where you can actually use her active skill against the pure Saiyan enemy, which creates more orbs for her, makes her effective against all types, just allows her to do even more damage. So I know some people do debate about these two. Like I say, if you wanted to switch their slots around, I'd be perfectly fine with that, but Kefla comes in at number 5. So continuing the top 5, we then have number 4. Number 4 is Kid Buu. Now, I don't know, some people might have Kefla above Kid Buu, or maybe some of the other units who are more damage focused above Kid Buu, but I thought up until the release of STR Broly that Kid Buu was probably the best Super EZA unit so far, and the main reason for that is because obviously he's doing some great stuff, right? He's supporting the team by a very considerable amount. He's got big bad bosses, which is super helpful for a bunch of these extreme teams. And then, of course, he builds up damage reduction by taking some hits. So, I mean, he can be a bit of a liability in his very first turn, or like very early on. But one of the reasons why I consider him to be so good and why I have him so high on the list, again, kind of comes back to what we were talking about with teams. Like this guy, I feel like is one of these units where if you can run him on a team, you should be running him on that team. Like if he fits under the leader skill of the unit that you're running as your leader, like why wouldn't you have this guy on the team, basically? Providing all that support, can be a third slot floater without having to worry too much about taking like large amounts of damage. He just generally is a very, very good unit, very effective on any team build that he's on. He kind of does, I guess, rely on having big bad bosses a little bit just to make sure that against some of the tougher enemies, even with that damage reduction, especially early when you want to get it built up, that he isn't taking too much damage. But I never really find too many situations where this guy is getting absolutely destroyed, unless, of course, again, like we're talking big end game boss super attacks if he has to eat a super in slot 3. Although a lot of these events now, as we quite often say, like a lot of these events will be supering in slot 1 very regularly. So there's a lot of instances where like this guy's never actually going to have to worry about getting hit by a super. And he just provides so much to the team. He's got HP recovery as well. Like he's just super good, right? You can put him on any of these team builds that he's on, and he is kind of like a go-to unit for those teams. He even supports the superclass allies as well. So even on like the Angel Super Saiyan 3 Goku version of like a Buu Saga team, you can just throw this guy on there, and then he's providing support to them as well. So Kid Buu, I think, is really, really good. Now, again, like depending on how you choose to evaluate units yourself, I could perfectly understand people putting units like Kefla above this guy because of the damage. I mean, I already talked about how I'm a guy who loves big damage units, but I'm also a big fan of floating support units, and I'm one of these people that, as I've said before, will defend units. If a character's on the team to provide support and to provide a ton of utility, then they don't need to be doing damage or tanking big supers, right? I'm a big believer in units have their specific roles, kind of like a party in an RPG, right? Like characters have a specific role that they're supposed to fill, and you shouldn't expect them to be good at the roles that they're not on the team for, right? So Kid Buu is there for big support. He might not do as much damage as Kefla. He's supporting the team. I mean, he can tank normals technically better than her because their post-super defense isn't going to be worlds apart, but then this guy actually has damage reduction. So there are pros and cons, of course, across the board. Let me know what you guys think. But Kid Buu I put at number 4, and now we have the top 3. So I imagine people could probably guess who these 3 are. The order may be different than yours, let me know. I think you could probably put the top 3 in almost any order, maybe, although I think it's... I would probably be... I'm happy with the way I ordered the top 3. So at number 3, we have Tech Ultimate Gohan. I know a lot of people will be surprised or disappointed, I guess, that he isn't still at number 1. But I think with the other 2 units and everything that they do, I think this guy has finally been dethroned. Kind of funny that within like the same celebration, because I mean, it's pretty obvious who the other 2 units are, right? But within the same celebration, within a short amount of time, this guy's been knocked down to number 2 and then to number 3, because we've gotten 2 absolutely fantastic EZA'S towards the end of this celebration. But Gohan is still really good. Obviously having that damage reduction on the first turn helps him. That was kind of his weakest spot, was on the first turn. He could be a bit of a liability before he started to get any build up. So that was a perfect addition to his EZA, giving him that damage reduction for the first turn. And then of course, like, you know, this guy, whilst it is RNG related, I've had multiple runs with this guy where he just gets the quad super turn as turn 1, which then of course sets him up absolutely fantastically for going crazy for the next few turns, building up that defense incredibly quickly to being very, very strong defensively. So I think overall this guy is still absolutely fantastic. If you still think he's number 2 or even number 1, I don't necessarily think he is number 1 anymore, but I probably wouldn't argue like if you put him at number 2 based on your thoughts on these other 2 units that we're going to talk about. But I don't know, you could make an argument for him being at number 1 still, I guess, with some of the new team builds, because like he's not on this guy, because he's not on Bond of Master and Disciple, he's not on Beast Gohan's team, and then obviously he's not on like All Out Struggle or Super Saiyan, so he's not on the physical trio team. So when we think about the couple of like the best at the moment top tier superclass teams in the game, like he's not on a couple of those leader skills. Which is a little bit disappointing, and of course means that you don't get to use him as much. Doesn't mean that he's not as good of a unit, but as we said, like I think teams and where you can run these guys and stuff does play a bit of a role, and definitely is something that I factor in when thinking about like who is, you know, who are the best EZAs in the game. You know, like I say, if someone is the best unit but they're on fewer teams, I feel like they have to go on a slightly lower spot, and definitely Gohan I think is a unit that falls into that kind of description, right? But let me know what you guys think down below. But Gohan is at number 3 for me, and then we have at number 2 the STR Super EZA Broly. Now the reason why I put this guy so high is because of everything that he does, right? He is, I think, the best Super EZA, so he had to be above all the other Super EZA characters in the list, because I personally think he is now the best Super EZA character. I think the way I look at this guy is he basically does everything that Kid Buu does and then more. So if I was somebody who was saying that Kid Buu was the best Super EZA character before, then it's like, well, how can I not have this guy as the new best Super EZA character when I think he is basically just Kid Buu but better, right? So I think this guy is at number 2. He can do absolutely crazy damage, and I've had multiple people confirm it now. I wasn't sure if that was the case after someone had pointed it out in the comments of one of my videos, but I've seen some people essentially saying that the way his passive works with the every time he performs a super, he gets the 30% extra attack and defense and then that bit of damage reduction. That counts for, if you're fighting multiple enemies, every enemy that gets hit by his AoE gives him a proc of that passive. So because we've now gotten multiple new stages where you fight multiple enemies, that means that on that first turn, he does his first super, he hits like 3 enemies, that's 3 procs. So then he does the second super, which is pretty much guaranteed as long as you can get 2 rainbow orbs, which he creates. And then he hits those 3 units again, and then that's his passive fully maxed out in the first turn. And the 2 newest events that we just got to end off the movie edition Blue Zone for the Worldwide Celebration both start off with you fighting multiple enemies. So this guy's absolutely crazy. Can build up to, after supering, he can be at 1.5 or even slightly higher defense, 1.5 million, with 50% damage reduction. And when you pick up the rainbow orbs, he's providing attack and defense to the extreme allies 20% per rainbow orbs. Now, sometimes you can't get the 4 orbs with him, which is what gives him guaranteed crit and a second additional super, but I've had very few instances where I'm not getting at least 3 rainbow orbs with him at a time, which means he's doing all that other stuff that we just said with the damage reduction. He's doing all of that whilst also providing 60% support to all the allies on the team with those 3 rainbow orbs. And even at a bare minimum, you get the 2. Even if you just get the 1, which of course would be his worst turn because he's not getting any additional stuff from this last part of his passive, that's still giving some support to the rotation. So this guy I think is absolutely fantastic. He is the best Super EZA, and I think he's only just pipped out to number 1 by physical Goten and Trunks. And the reason why I think these guys are number 1, they're on a few more, I mean, I guess I say more teams, but Broly also has the advantage of he can just be run with other superclass like Saiyan units, because he gets his orb changing if you have a pure Saiyan ally on rotation and not just Planetary Destruction. Now, because he starts off as Legendary Super Saiyan, he's not on Super Saiyans, which will definitely give him a bit more of a buff, which these guys are on. But these guys are on a ton of teams. And one of the reasons why these guys are so good is once they've got their passive built up, which their EZA gave them the perfect addition, dodging attacks or receiving attacks to build up their dodge chance and their attack and defense, these guys can easily be post super at like 2 million defense with an 80% chance to dodge. So I've had runs where, I mean, we did a Cell Max run where we were using double physical Goten and Trunks leads. I've had runs where once these guys get their passive built up, which means they've either been hit or dodged 5 times, I've then put them in slot 1 and they've just been a slot 1 unit for the rest of the run and they dodge everything because they have an 80% chance to dodge. And the thing is, if you have the full Kamehameha rotation, they then also have a 30% damage reduction. So you think about, we're saying about Broly having like 1.5 million and 50%. These guys can have over 1.5 million and 30% damage reduction, which is less, but then they're backing it up with an 80% chance to dodge, which is just absolutely ridiculous when it comes to defensive capability. And the thing is, a lot of people focus on like their unit super or their active skill requiring a Goten, Trunks or Krillin. Not only are the Int Trunks, Int Goten and Tech Trunks actually kind of good with their EZAs from the Golden Week celebration, they really just needed another, well, they needed these guys to EZA basically for them to be a lot better. And now that that's happened, you can have those allies to run with them. But even without their unit super, they're still really, really good. They're still getting the greatly raised attack and defense. The unit super is only really giving them the ally support for 2 turns, which, don't get me wrong, is very, very good. And if you are actually able to get that active, that is another really great addition that they bring to the team. But yeah, these guys can, like, I've seen turns where they get like triple 25 or even 30 million attack stat supers, and then they just dodge every single attack on the turn, so they take 0 damage. So these guys are absolutely brilliant. I mean, you could even argue, if you really wanted to, that Broly was better. But I think these guys, because they fit on more teams, have a slightly better link set, you do have that ability to get their unit super and then get the support for the rest of the team. I think these guys are the best EZA in the game on global currently. So let me know what you guys think down below in the comment section. If we switch over to the full view here of the tier list, this is the 1 to 10 list in reverse order. Tech Super Saiyan 3 Super EZA Gotenks, Physical Super EZA Goku Black, Int Broly, Tech Exchange Buu, Int Gotenks, STR Kefla, Physical Kid Buu, and then Tech Gohan at 3, STR Super EZA Broly at 2, and Physical Goten and Trunks as number 1. So let me know what you guys think down below in the comment section. Like I said, if you disagree with any of these placements, do let me know in a civil fashion and we can discuss it down below in the comment section. And let me know what your personal top 10 list would look like down below as well. So that is going to be it for the video, guys. This has been the Masked Ningen. Smash that like button, subscribe to the channel if you are new. Check out the links down below, and I will see you all again soon. Have a good one.